Hi guys. Today I thought I'll talk about the different type of cuts that we use while we edit, and I'm trying, but right now I wouldn't be able to give you videos in between the interview because it has copyright and it has permissions and stuff like that. But what I've done this time is that I've given in the description of the video, I've given you some YouTube links for some of the difficult things to understand, some topics. So, to start with, I think, the cuts are named in different ways. So, the basic cut from one shot to another is called a standard cut, which is to go from one shot to another shot and convey the dialogue or the story, something like that. So that is called a standard cut, which that is what we usually use if a scene is happening and first one shot is there, and then you cut at the end of a shot, you cut to another shot, and then you cut to another shot, and this juxtaposition of these shots together make it a sequence. So this is a basic standard cut we employ in editing, But there are various other improvisations which we have done over the years, over several decades, I'm sure, is that we use a lot of other things, So suppose one shot is there and you want it to be cut 2-3 times with another shot, where just for an example, it's two people are looking at each other. Could be anger, could be love, could be pity, anything. But when that happens, you do a thing called intercutting. We call it intercutting. The same space, same place, but you use a number of times a similar shot to cut it across 2-3 times, and we call that intercutting, So this is another type of cut name, cut. So when you hear a name intercut, this is what it means. You intercut two objects or two close-ups again and again to create an effect. Is to create a conflict or to create a love or any emotion that you want at the point. Then, of course, another thing which is the action cut, which is that most of the people, even I, believe in action cut. Maybe some editors don't believe. Is that when a scene, a shot has an action which moves into an other shot, which means if a person, for example, a person is sitting down and he gets up, and then in that movement you aim to cut to a wider perspective, it suddenly feels very organically smooth for me, because you're moving with the action. So, or if he's turning, on the turn you cut to another shot which shows a different perspective, then it becomes a smooth movement. It's not like for me it gets away from the feeling of being staged, like theater. So that action is what, and it makes it much smoother, and it becomes as if it is happening really. So I try maximum to use that, but in some cases it so happens that you won't be able to use it also because of certain limitations. Is that after he has said the actor has said a particular word, dialogue, and he has to get up immediately, which needs an immediate reaction for him to get up, but he is not doing it. For whatever reason, he delays it by about 3 seconds. Then probably it doesn't make sense to have a action cut at the time. Wait for the 3-4 seconds, because it will become a delayed reaction. So the moment he says, then you can cut to a shot where he just gets up in the wide shot or other shot, other perspective, and he moves. So some editors use this mostly, and they don't go for action match cuts, But action match cuts got a beauty about it, especially in action sequences and all that. No, when a particular action is happening, and the same action, if he's turning around and hitting somebody or jumping, so it gives you a feeling of being very real. You know, it's really happening. It doesn't have the cut point, doesn't become a stage thing where you stop, you finish the dialogue, and then you turn on the next shot. Makes it look as if it's been shot and it's been staged. So that is another thing, you know, match cut, which can be used. Generally, we use it for most of the possible places. Then there is a thing called cutaway. What is a cutaway is that when a particular scene is happening and you go and show something else. I mean, two people are speaking, but you have a shot of another person or another object which is going to play a part in the scene. You show it also in between. No, it's called a cutaway. Sometimes you use a cutaway to put in a point that something is going to happen with this character or object later in the scene. So it's a sort of or it can be a deviation, or it can, and sometimes we also use cutaway to reduce the length of the scene. You know, one whole thing, it has been shot in a single shot and lots of dialogue is going on, and then you realize at the end edit that you don't want so much dialogue. You would probably reduce the dialogues by part, but you cannot cut because it's a single shot and you can't remove the in between because it will jump action. So what happens is we use cutaway sometimes, but when you use a cutaway, it has to have a meaning for it. You know, it has to definitely have a particular meaning to have a cutaway. So these cutaways, like sometimes you have cutaways like nature, birds, everything, but they should all add meaning to the whole sequence and not just for the purpose of solving your edit problem at that time. You know, that's very important, I think. And then there's one interesting thing called sound overlap, but in technical terms we call it L cut, which is that if a scene is progressing and at some point it is going to lead to another scene, you know, it is going to lead to the next scene, then sometimes I overlap the sound of this scene onto the next scene, the end part of it. So, and it smoothly graduates to the next scene, because the next scene anyway is an implication of this scene. So it gives you a certain movement. Instead of finishing the statement here and then going to the next scene, you could probably slip in the dialogue of the previous scene onto the next scene and start off the next scene. This is called L cut, we call it, and it moves the narrative in a very smooth, it's a sort of a sound transition it comes under. You know, you can use it in such situations. And the opposite of that, there is another thing, which is that sometimes a scene is progressing and in the end there is a little bit of stay on a character and you want to stay because you want to see the emotion. At the end of it, sometimes we use the sound of the next scene. We add it here and start off the scene, you know. Then this, in technical terms in books, it's called a cue cut. But the thing is that this is also a sound cut, which the sound of the next scene comes on the previous scene itself so it sets up the mood for what is going to come. And it gives, at many places, it gives a good transition to scenes. You know, if there's no definite transition sometimes, you know, these sound cuts work very well to move from one scene to another. So this is another way of looking at different type of cuts. And then another interesting thing is a montage. Montage is an element in which you take a lot of visuals, you put it into one edit sequence, which mostly we use is for passage of time. And we use a lot of visuals in a smaller time frame, Normally if you're going to say 3 years, it took 3 years, but you want to show the pain, you want to show. So I've just given an example of, I'll give you an example of Vanaprastham is a film which I've done. In that we had this place where there were, after love making till going to her delivery, there was a time period which we need to show, otherwise you would not understand, or it will become very mechanical, like putting a card and saying after 9 months or something like that. So we didn't want to do that. So a director had shot some visuals, we strung it together and made it into a montage. In the montage, it starts with shots which shows different aspects of that woman sitting, and the end shot lands up in which sitting where she's got a bulge in her tummy and she's pregnant. So in a short span of 1 to 2 minutes, I was able to convey that in a musical way. So montages can be in a different way also. See, suppose you want to establish a market, a montage of different shots in the market, because it's important to the story that this market plays an important part and you want to explore the world. So to make it interesting, you can cut a number of shots of the market or that ambience together to create a montage, which can be musical or it can have the effects or sound effects of that place, and it can. Sometimes montages have been used in different ways also, like Good, Bad and Ugly. If you see the old film, you see there'll be a montage of shots where all the faces of the characters are shown. So it's completely going around showing all the faces before a face-off. He uses lots of shots there, which becomes a sort of a montage. So this is what montage is all about. Then there is a thing called match cut. Match cut is something like, it can be with sound, it can be with anything. It's to jump from one place to another. See, in case you want to move from this scene to the next scene, but it has to give you an impact of moving without knowing that you have, it shouldn't slow down the proceedings. So like hitting a matchstick and it glows, that sound you cut and you show at the different place where things are happening. These sort of things. Or a door closes and then you cut to another scene. Normally in writing or transition, you would have written that he had gone from here, then he would have traveled all the way and reached. But you would probably, at the point of the script, you wouldn't want to dwell too much into it. So you would have jumped that thing, So there are lots of places in films which you do that, where you use the one object here, which will go into and also they do it in a different way, is that a lot of people take the same object here and somebody is mixing in a spoon in a bowl of food, and then you match cut it to the same ball, not the same ball, similar spoon being in a different space, and it moves to that scene. So these sort of techniques are used to move from one scene to another in a very interesting manner. So you don't even know that you have moved to the next scene. I mean, if there's no pause or there's no at that point, because the story doesn't demand it. You need to move that information fast. You want to get to the next, even if it means that he's traveled 5,000 kilometers, doesn't matter. But using things like this to move the story forward, I think it's very interesting, because we've also tried in lots of films this sort of cutting. And then I think very interesting editing pattern is the parallel editing, or you can even call it cross-cutting. This is used mostly to show two things at the same, which are happening at the same time. Suppose A person and B person in two places are at the same time are being attacked, and you can't show one and then you can't show two, because in cinematically it will look wrong, because it happened at the same 12 a.m. or whatever like that. So what do? You intercut these things as a parallel story. So you go across here and grow. So if you imagine the timeline as 1 minute, in this 1 minute, if you devote first 10 seconds here, then you go to the next 10 seconds in that place, and then you go back to the 10 seconds here, then you go back to the 10 seconds. So you intercut. It probably, sometimes it happens that these two can culminate in one place also. If there are two incidents happening next to each other and they both are rushing to the same place, it can culminate also. This is why parallel editing or cross-cutting happens mostly. Sometimes cross-cutting happens also because of conceptually it can happen, is that you cross-cut to show that similar elements you want to show at the same time. So here one element is happening, there one element. It's not about time, but it's the same element, you know. Rain is happening in this place, and where the other character is there also rain is happening. So something like that, you try to make a medley of cross-cutting to bring about a certain connection between the two things, you know. It can be same time frame, or it can be same emotion also, you know. Sometimes it can be the emotion which wants you to cross-cut between two events to make it interesting. And there are some examples I've given you at the description level. Like a very good example is in a foreign film is Godfather, where he is getting baptized. The baptism is happening, and lots of killings are happening. It's supposed to be happening at the same time, you know. So you can clearly understand that's the concept. I've done it in recent 2 films, and THUPAKI I've done it in 1 film, where 12 people go on a mission and all of them have to be shown, and they have to do a job at the same time. So we had to cut across these 12 people. So I'm just moving the story in such a way that the 12 people move, and you get a sense that they are all moving parallelly. And then sometimes I had to use some split screen to show that there are 8 people, because they are not faces who are regular actors, but they are newer actors, and so I had to do a split screen and put 6 at a time walking, and then 12 at a time walking. So you clearly established 12, then I took the time, and then parallelly they are attacking those people, you know. And even in a recent film called CHEKKA VAANAM, there was one sequence where we have cut it in a song, but the whole thing was the 3 people were being attacked by the opposite antagonist, and it was happening at the same time. So how you cut it across and come to the conclusion, you know. That is what is cross-cutting, the beauty of cross-cutting is. And then as time passes, you know, with the advent of digital medium, I can call it in-frame editing also, because even the frames I'm able to edit sometimes. See, because they're shooting at different resolutions. Nowadays it is even at 8K and 6K and things like that. What happens is, if I find the shot, the framing a little loose, I can actually zoom it in, and it can still hold resolution on the screen, because it's shot at a very high resolution. So this I would put it under in-frame editing. So I would reframe the frame, in the sense that if I find the top is slightly loose, I could actually zoom the shot a little and keep the top and bottom in a way that, or if it is shot in 8K, I can even sometimes make it a close-up and not a 2-shot. A 2-shot can go so much, it can be pushed inside so much, so it can become so it's a different way of inventing different shots for the purpose, you know. But they may have shot 2-3 shots, but we wanted a shot where you go closer. So then because you have the facility right now of equipment and also shooting on a resolution which can be done. So you can immediately do that and see, I mean, go closer, go whatever. So, and also another thing we do lots of times is it's a little more of a, this thing is, if you have 2 takes and if 2 people are speaking opposite to each other, and if one character is very good in the first take and if the another character is good in the second take, we can even splice these 2 takes together if there is a margin to splice in between, you know, if there is a space in between to splice in. Very simply, you can actually attach these 2 shots to become one shot. All this is a sort of you start inventing when you start working on digital film. So I think this is all the information I wanted to give you on different type of cuts that could be used. And the main thing is that you have to remember that. And another thing I forgot about is the jump cuts. You know, the jump cuts is something which is by the purists and by theory is very wrong, because it jerks, you know, it gives you a feeling of jerky actions, you know, every time one action moves to another action, you feel a jerk. But over years it has been used consistently, and it can be used for in different perspectives. See, if the same shot, if it's jump cut, it gives jerks. But in old films and now new films, lot of films, you can also jump time by doing jump cuts, where suppose a person is bombing if it's an army film and somebody is bombing a place. After showing the first time, you don't want to show again every time the bomb going, you know, so you can show as jump cuts the sort of effect it has on different explosions and things like that. So jump cuts can have this sort of meanings also, where you jump normal continuity and you show a lot of information which will make the scene, it will enhance the scene. But when I use jump cuts in a same shot where a person, for example, a person is restless, he's sitting, you want to show him for that he has sat there for 8 hours. It's physically impossible to show such lengthy shots and show the time span. So lots of people, what they do is they show him at one place, then he sits in another place, and then he sits in another place. It's the same frame. He's sitting in different places, and it denotes he's getting bored and time is passing. Some people use dissolves to make it smoother, but what I've noticed is that, you know, in this jump cuts, if the visuals are cut in a very metric way, in very equal lengths, then it doesn't jar as much as it would normally jar as a jump cut, because our mind also gets tuned to a certain rhythm. The rhythm will be like 2 seconds, 3 seconds, like that. So every 3 seconds, if the shot is getting, you will get used to it after 5-6 shots, and it won't look so jerky. So this is what I wanted to share today, and please see the description in the video, which has a few links to the videos I want to show you for different purposes.